Hello and welcome to the Godly Playroom at First United Church in Wetaskiwin, Alberta. My name is Ruth Lomax and it's my delight to be back telling stories in this space. I'm not sure when you're going to be able to join us in person, so for now I'm getting this video ready so that you can engage as we begin this fall season. A time of getting ready and settling into new routines and new possibilities. I'm wearing my mask whenever I'm greeting people or in close proximity. I'm going to be in the recording space by myself though, so once I'm in the room, I'll take the mask off. Remember just to touch your mask on the ear hooks, not on the face at the front, and to make sure you sanitize before you take it off and before you put it on again. Are you ready? I wonder what you need to help you settle. Oh, I wonder what you've been doing all summer. So many different things have been happening. And I hope you're more excited than anxious about going back to school. So let's take a few deep breaths. In through the nose and out through the mouth. You might even want to roll your shoulders a bit as you settle in. I think I need one more. Are you ready? Welcome to the circle. It's great to have you with us. Today's story is a story told in a godly play way. It's not really a godly play copyright story. And it's shared with us from our Quaker friends. And it reminds us to listen more deeply for God. We're still in this green and growing season, but pretty soon we're going to be in the time of creation. You can see those orange circles or orange colors are getting very close. We're on the very last Sunday of this part of the green and growing Sundays after Pentecost. And then we begin 5 weeks of creation time. Sometimes these weeks are not always the same amount of time between the green that comes after through to Advent. And so when you're in the Godly Playroom, you may get to move them to another part of that green and growing cycle. So next week, the colors will all change again as we move into that creation time. But for now, let's settle into this time that is ours. Whew. And I invite us, if you're at home and want to find a candle to light or a battery candle that's safer for you, you can do that. Our candle is here. And it's a little bit shorter than when we gathered last in June. We had Vacation Bible Camp here this summer, and so the candle burnt through that time as well. It's very deep today, so you might not be able to see it when it's lit, but just because we can't see it doesn't mean it isn't there. And after today, I'll trim it, so next week you will be able to see it. But even if you can't see it, you can remember these words. That once there was someone who said and did such amazing things and such wonderful things that people began to follow him. And the more they followed him, the more they wondered who he was. And so one time they just had to ask, "Who are you?" That's a question people are going to be asking as you go back to school and you meet new teachers and you meet new friends. There will be all kinds of questions about Who are you? And different ways that you might answer. But one time, when they asked this person that question, he said, "I'm the light." You see the light? It's in there. I'm going to put it back on the shelf though, so we have a little more room to tell our story. It's kind of nice to still be in shorts at this time of year. It is a beautiful long weekend weather-wise. And a kind of a last chance, eh? To just enjoy before the new routines begin again. I hope you enjoy our time together today. You could let me know. You can check this out. It'll be on our Facebook page and on our YouTube channel, First United Wetaskiwin. We are not alone. We live in God's world, and God is never far away. God's Spirit is as close as breath. But unless we stop and listen, we might not notice it. Listening takes practice. We listen with our whole selves. We listen with our body. We listen with our mind. We listen with our heart and our imagination, our spirit. Sometimes God comes so close to us, and we come so close to God, that we know God deep within ourselves, in that place sometimes we call the heart, where God is at home in us, and we are home in God. We feel God's presence. And the Spirit moves within us so that we know how to love, and what to do, and who to be. Sometimes God comes to us in another person. God in me recognizes God in the other. Heart touches heart. And we are moved to say, "Welcome, God." And the Spirit helps us know how to love, what to do, and who to be. Listening takes practice. We listen with our whole selves. Sometimes God comes to us through the gifts of creation. God speaks to us through our senses. God touches our eyes, our ears, our nose, our tongue. Our skin. When we notice God in the world around us, we know God's presence, and we might be moved to respond, "Here I am, God." And the Spirit helps us know how to love, what to do, and who to be. We listen with our whole selves, but listening takes practice. Sometimes God speaks to us through sacred stories. God at work in the words of others works in us, and we know God's presence. What are those sacred stories? They might be the ancient texts of the people who came close to God in the desert. They might be the teachings or parables of Jesus, which are a gift to us. They might be the stories of other people of faith in any time and place who have come close to God and who live by faith and love. God also speaks to us sometimes through other words, through poems, prayers, and music. The Spirit in those words, at work in those words, helps us to know God's presence. And we become more open to receive that gift. But listening takes practice. We listen with our whole selves. Sometimes God comes to us when we gather. When we gather in community or in worship or in service, God touches our hearts. And heart connects to heart. And we are open to recognizing God in one another. And when we receive that gift of God's presence in community, we might also become God's presence to someone else. We can say, "Welcome, God," and "Here I am, God." And we can become a part of God's eyes and ears and hands and feet in the world. Listening takes practice. And we can listen for God in any time and place. We can listen for God and with God with our whole selves. Our body, our mind, our heart, hearts, our imagination, our spirit. And whenever we do, the Spirit shows us how to love and what to do and who to be. I wonder what part of this story you like best. I wonder what part of this story is most important. I wonder if there's any part of this story we could leave out and still have all the story that we need. I wonder what part of this story is most like you, or where you are in this story. Some of those are big questions, and you might want to pause the video, which you know you can do at any time, and do some more thinking, or maybe have some conversations if you're able to watch this with people in your household. And whenever you're ready, we'll start to put this story away. And you might want to think about what you want to get to do for your work. I have a few things here to share with you. So, there's that imagination piece about how we can listen for God in any time and place. I wonder where you listen best for God. I wonder where you've heard God recently. Sometimes we hear God in community, where heart touches heart, and the Spirit moves amongst us. We remember, those flames of the Spirit. Sometimes we hear God through the words of others, poetry and music or prayer, and the parables and the teachings of Jesus, which are a gift. And even in some words that are so ancient, they were written in other languages or told like we tell stories in a circle around a campfire. And we listen with our whole selves. Sometimes God touches our skin, our tongue, our nose, our ears, and our eyes. God often comes to us in other people. And sometimes just when we are still, or going about doing other things, and God speaks to us. You can pause the video now if you want to go and get your work, and you can start it up again whenever you're ready. Some of the things I've brought are things that help me listen for God. This is a Tibetan singing bowl, and the people of Tibet use them when they begin their prayers or as a reminder of the presence of the holy. And sometimes we use it here in worship, and I use it in my own prayer time, just to remind people. To listen. Can you still hear it? This summer at VBC, one of our themes was talking with God and the gift that God gives us of all our emotions. So there are some things that we created to help us celebrate and sing praise to God. You can make this so easily with a stick and some pipe cleaner and some jingle bells. Or you might just put some items in a container. You can make all different kinds of sounds with shakers. We also made some drums. Depending on what you use for your materials, you can change the sound of your drum. This one is just a plastic container with some rubber gloves stretched over it and an elastic to hold it in place. We made some with tin cans. You can make them with different kinds of drum skins. Create your own mallet for striking, your own drumstick. One of the favorite things in this room is the sound that sand makes when we crunch our way through it in the desert box. I wonder, what are some of the sounds of your summer? Did you get to walk in some sand? Maybe splash in some water? Maybe you listen to the sound of raindrops falling. Or the sound of the wind rattling the windows and squeaking in the tree branches. So many ways God has of speaking to us. Sometimes even in those fun, silly sounds. Like that of a shaving cream can, or air and moisture under pressure. You can use shaving cream and food coloring if you want to do some fun finger painting. God speaks to us, and the Spirit moves within us to show us how to love, what to do, and who to be. I'm going to clean up my mess here and put things away and get ready for feast. You can pause the video if you'd like to take more time with your response work, or to go and find some of the things that you might like to have for feast. I think I'm actually going to take us upstairs because we celebrated communion on Sunday. And that's a feast that draws us into those ancient stories and invites us to remember and to listen for God. But for now, I need to clean up. Welcome back. This is where we share the Feast of Communion. It's going to sound a little bit echoey because this is a very big space. But we gather at this table to remember and to give thanks for the life of Jesus, for his life, his death on the cross, but mostly for the resurrection, that promise that no matter what happens to us in life, in death, in life beyond death, God is with us. And so when we gather at this table, we say a big prayer, just like we do in the Godly Playroom downstairs. Sometimes it's called the prayer of thanksgiving or the Eucharistic prayer, but it is a prayer that gives thanks for God's presence throughout the generations and in the different lives of faithful people in the world, and especially in Jesus, the one whom we call Light of the World. And after we've given those prayers and we remember that on the night Jesus sat at table with his friends, he took some bread and he blessed it and he broke it and he shared it with them. And he said something like, "This is the bread of life, my body broken for you." Or whenever you share the bread like this, I'll be there. And in the same way, he took a cup of the fruit of the vine. And after he gave thanks, he poured it out. And he shared it with them. And he said, whenever you share the cup like this, I'll be there. Or something like, this is the cup of the covenant made with my life. Drink from it in remembrance of me and for the forgiveness of sins. Sharing communion this past year has been very challenging. Many of us have been worshiping online, and so we bring our own elements to this virtual table. This past week, we shared communion for the first time in the building for over a year and a half. We do our best to ensure that people are welcome and included at this table. Not everybody feels comfortable being here. Sometimes it's about how we feel about ourselves, or we don't think we know enough about God or about Jesus. But in the United Church of Canada, we believe that this table is part of how we learn, and that at family meals, when the stories are shared and people gather, life is enhanced and God is present. So we've chosen to just use grape juice instead of wine, which means people that struggle with alcohol addictions are welcome at this table without fear of triggering their addiction. We've experimented to a certain extent with gluten-free and dairy-free bread so that people who have food allergies or reactions to gluten can also be at this feast and know that they are safe. Sometimes people come forward and they take a piece of bread and they dip it in the cup. That's called intinction. But with all the restrictions and the need to be extra careful for people's safety, this past Sunday when we celebrated communion, we had people remain seated where they were. And 2 servers who were masked and vaccinated and had gloves on took little glasses and a single rice cracker to each person in turn, so that we only ever had 1 or maybe 2 people with their mask off at any time. and only for the time it took them to share the feast. Sometimes it's hard to be joyful at this feast when there are so many things to think about. But even there, in our wishing things were different, in our struggling to understand, God is. And so we take time to listen, to give thanks for the Holy One who is for us living bread, bread of life, manna in the wilderness, all those stories that talk about the importance and the life-giving nature that is bread. And we remember the love of God poured out through us in the life and the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who is for us the cup of blessing that brings joy even in the most difficult of times. These are the gifts of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. I'll invite you to share whatever you have for your feast. And when you're ready, come on back and we will change the light. And before we know it, we've come to the end of our time. I hope you found some time today or in this coming week to listen with God. It's always worth it, but it does take practice. There are so many noises going on around us all the time. So watch what happens when I change the light, so that it isn't just in this one place, but it can be in many places. Watch. Some people miss this part. Not yet. Nope, not yet. There. Oh. It is time to trim the candle. Thank you for sharing this time with us. May you come close to the holy. Stay safe, be well, and look after one another. Until we meet again.